We're going to start off with Congresswoman Claudia Tenney and get into a lot of current issues. Then we're going to talk to a good friend of mine, Michael Caputo. So we've got a lot to cover today. So let me give you a little bit of background about Claudia Tenney. First of all, Claudia is an attorney. She started off in private practice. Again, we have someone who knows how to sign a paycheck on the front as well as the back, who's been in private business. So Claudia Tenney was a practicing attorney in private practice. Her father was a Supreme Court judge. She was a business woman owner. She was co-owner of Mid-York Press. So this is a woman who has the background that we want to see in an elected official. So, and she's also no stranger to radio. In 2001, she co-hosted Common Sense, a radio and TV program that aired weekly. In 2010, she co-hosted First Look on radio, so she certainly is no stranger to this medium. Let me tell you a little bit about her political career. Interestingly, in 2002, she was legal counsel and chief of staff to a New York assemblyman. That's, I presume, how she gets this closely involved. In 2009, she actually ran for surrogate judge, but she lost that race. But she came back in 2011 to run for the assembly and was successful in that run. She voted against the SAFE Act. She called it an assault on upstaters. We'll talk to her a little bit about that. In 2014, she decided to run for Congress, but she lost in that primary, but came back in 2016, won a three-way primary, and then obviously won the seat. And she is our Congresswoman. So, Claudia, good morning.
Well, good morning, Chairman Larigo. It's so great to have you on. Painful to listen to my political career there, but it's I should have gotten in it long ago, but my father always wanted me to be a judge, and I tried, but now I'm a member of Congress, so I think he'd probably be happy with that, too.
Oh, I'm sure he would be very happy with your career, Claudia. You've done an excellent job. You're one of these true believers who believes in public service, and certainly on the right side of public service. So your father was a Supreme Court judge. That's interesting. My son is now a Supreme Court judge here in Western New York. I'm very proud of that. But tell me, in terms of, you started off in private practice. How did you get involved in the political aspect?
Well, I never thought this was something I would do politically. My father was the Oneida County Republican chair from like 1962 to 1968. Then he ran for judge. He was only 38 years old, and I think he's one of the longest serving, if not the longest serving, Supreme Court justice. He actually ran for 3 terms, 68, 82, and again in 96.
Wow.
And then, died young. He was only 74. But I have to tell you, one of his favorite places to go was Buffalo. He loved to go. He served in Buffalo. In the old days, the Supreme Court justices used to travel all around the state and sit in various different judicial districts. He loved Buffalo, had tons of friends there, and he used to, Vinnie Doyle, actually, the late Vinnie Doyle. Vinnie Doyle married my sister, so he used to come down. My dad and they, when he had some free time, he loved playing the golf courses out in Buffalo, loved going, up to Niagara on the lake and Niagara Falls and meeting with and I showed horses out there too. So I've ridden at the Buffalo Saddle and Bridle Club. I actually was a judge in the at the Lockport, the Niagara County Fair when I was a teenager. I used to show and travel out there all the time for when I was an equestrian. So, the Western New York, I've been going there my whole life, and my father loved it out there. And when I first got out of law school, I actually, my now ex-husband and I moved to Canandaigua, where my marriage license is. So we eventually, my father wanted us to go back to the Utica area, and I practiced law there. I did, never really thought I'd be involved in politics. So my dad was a judge, and of course he wasn't actively engaged in politics, obviously, as a Supreme Court justice. But, it really just didn't, I don't know. I guess I left my practice to run our family business, which was, full-time practice. I was a partner in a law firm, an old sort of legacy law firm in Utica with a lot of lot of great clients, and I did just about everything you could do, in that, including a lot of litigation myself, because nobody else went to court in my firm except me. And my dad was always like, he was a trial lawyer, so he was like, you got to go learn how to do cases. You know, got to learn how to put evidence on. You got to do all that. So I did it. I really enjoyed it, but there was a need. My dad got really sick, and my mom wanted me to run the business. She was older, so I ran the business, which was a newspaper. The Mid-York Weekly was one of our newspapers. Really old newspaper, started in 1820. That was the roots. My grandfather actually bought it in 1946, and it was in our family, and we ended up selling the business in 2004. And that's when I made my turn into politics, because in 2002, as you mentioned, the former assemblyman, a guy named Dave Townsend, was running for assembly, and he had been a 12-year incumbent, and all of a sudden, the Republicans were working against him, and one of my father's law clerk actually called me up and said, hey, you ought to go sell some advertising to this Dave Townsend, and sell it to his opponent, too. You could make some money on it. And that's how I got kind of involved in selling advertising to politicians. They weren't our marketplace before for our newspaper, but we sold a lot of political ads. We had a really unique product. So that's how I ended up getting into politics. Dave Townsend ended up winning his primary and the general election, and then asked me to be his legal counsel and chief of staff. And I was like, I don't have time for that. I got our business. I got my son, who I raised as a single parent. My father and my mother, were across the street. My father was in a wheelchair. He was nearly blind. My mother had a lot of health problems. So I just had too many things on my plate. And he said, we'll make it work. And I worked for him for like 6 years. And then, my dad always wanted me to run for judge. And as you cited, I ran for judge in 2009. I won the primary. All the local Republicans in Oneida County were working against me. The county committee wouldn't endorse me. When I won the primary, they wouldn't support me. I was a true conservative in the race, and they ended up supporting the Democrat, who ended up winning, spent a record amount of money that year, and won by a narrow margin. I was like, okay, I guess that's it for the judge thing. And then the assembly race opened up, and the assemblyman said, hey, why don't you run for my seat? And that's how I got involved. And, of course, the local party endorsed my opponent. I had to win the primary to get into the assembly. And finally, it was always a challenge, not because I wasn't a good conservative. It was because I was a good conservative. And I am someone who believes in our country and our values and freedom and everything that we as conservatives stand for, because, our mission as conservatives is really the mission of our founders: self-governance, freedom, individual rights, standing up for all the things the Democrats are fighting to take away from us, all represented by who? Zoran Mandami, the leading candidate of the Democratic Party in New York City. They stand for authoritarianism. They stand for taking our rights away, handing everything out to everyone, taking away the self-reliance. And I think that's why I'm so mission-driven as someone in office. I'm not, I could do a lot of things, as you know, Ralph. I could go back and practice law. There's a lot. I've had numerous opportunities to do other things, but I think it's so important as New Yorkers that we have people that are fighting and standing up for our constituents. The great people who have stayed in New York State because they love it. They know our history is amazing. New York 24 is actually an incredible slice of the earth. Wonderful people here, legacy businesses, all the way, from one end to the other. So to me, it's all mission-driven. We work so hard in my office. I have fantastic staff. I explain every vote that I take in Congress in detail, in plain language, because I want to make sure that we are self-governing, that we, the people, know what is going on, that we don't have to rely on unreliable social media or groups that don't agree with us. And look, I have Democrats that follow me and also, look at and they say, well, I appreciate the vote explanation. I might have voted a different way than you, but thank you for putting it in plain language. And I'll tell you, Chairman, I have people from all over the world who follow my vote explanations because I'm still the only member that actually puts it in writing, that puts it out and puts it in English. And, you and I as lawyers, we like to explain things, but I think in writing people can pick and choose what they want to watch. But that's my long answer, how I got in politics. And I absolutely love the job. I love serving people. I love helping people. And it's kind of like being a lawyer, but you don't have to worry about chasing down your legal fee later.
Yeah, that would be a similar situation. But you're tenacious. You are, I believe that you're one of the very staunch conservatives, someone who isn't looking as to what the political winds say, but someone who really believes in our values. That's an important consideration. I think you're excellent at it, and I certainly appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thank you. Well, this is why else would we be in this? This is the greatest country. We've been given such a gift. And it's really interesting when you look at New York. We're coming up on our 250th celebration of this country. And you know what was one of the most important states? New York. We were a founding colony. The colony of New York, we were the people, our people that lived in New York stood up for the Bill of Rights and for freedom. That's who New Yorkers were. They weren't going to sign on to this federal constitution, that was going to basically find a way for national defense and border security. That was the reason we created the federal government 250 years ago. But what we wanted was, we want a Bill of Rights to make sure that this federal government doesn't get too large and too big and crush our rights. And I really think it's interesting that New York was one of the last states to sign on until we had a Bill of Rights. And I think that's what's really neat about our history. And just look at our history throughout the years, all the way up and down this Erie Canal corridor. I have basically the shoreline of Lake Ontario, starting in the St. Lawrence Seaway in Alexandria Bay, all the way around. I kind of go around Rochester, Monroe County, and then all the way to the Niagara border and then into the southern tier. You have incredible people throughout our history. Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, Susan B. Anthony. Guess what they all were? They were Republicans. They were people who stood up for women's rights, the abolitionist movement, ending slavery. And yet, where are we as a country and as a party of Republicans and conservatives? We have a natural marriage together. We should be fighting to show we are the party of freedom. We are the party of individual rights. We are the party that stood up for the people. And we need to do that again. And I know some of my left-wing critics will say, Trump is an authoritarian, but Trump really cares about these things and cares about people. And I think that's the part that a lot of people miss about him. They get caught up in his flurry. Maybe sometimes he likes to be a troll, and he takes to poke them a little bit. But I have to tell you, he really cares. If you meet with him one-on-one, he will give you the shirt off his back to help. He'll go out of and he's done this his whole life. It's not anything new. And I think that in spite of, he's a flawed person, we all are, but he has done so many amazing things, so many innovative things, and so many different ways to look at government, and he's courageous, and he understands a lot of these things. Now, I don't agree with him 100% of the time, but if I don't agree with him, I can always say, what about this, and where are we going? And you know what? He listens, and he takes all points of view, and I think that's one of the amazing things about him as the president and his tenacity. Talk about tenacity. How about a guy that had everything thrown at him, including being shot at twice, nearly killed, had an election, really suspect election, then came back and won another election decisively. So really just an incredible figure in our history, and I'm really, proud to serve with him again. And I know a lot of people are very unhinged and upset about him, but I think what he's doing is groundbreaking.
Mm-hmm. Look, you are a good supporter of Trump's. I personally met Trump in 2014. We tried to convince him to run for governor, but Roger Stone had told me back then that the man's not going to run for governor. He's going to run for president. And obviously he did. He won. He did some great things in that first 4 years. And now he's back and doing way more than ever, way more than anybody that I've seen, certainly in the first 6, 7, 8 months of his presidential tenure. So tell me this, your relationship with Trump is he supported you. He came out and supported you. Isn't that correct?
Oh, yeah. Yep, from day one. Actually, it's funny, I met him in 2013. When he was contemplating that run for governor, we were doing a rally. I had Remington Arms in my district, my assembly district at the time, and it was in my old congressional district. And we were fighting for Remington Arms, and Cuomo was on, it passed the SAFE Act, and we were, we had tried everything we could to protect our Second Amendment rights. And I was down at a rally with the Remington Arms employees, and Trump actually showed up at the rally. And that was the first time I met him, and he got up and gave a speech, and I I was surprised that he was going to run for governor, and I thought, oh, this is a tough state to run for governor with the way the trending is going. And he did ask me about it, and I said, you got to run for president. And he was like, well, I'm thinking about that, which I think is kind of funny. I look back, and who knew? But then he came down the escalator in 2015, and history was made. But I will say that he has always been 100% supportive. And what I like about him is, again, I can't tell you how, he does some things that maybe we don't all agree with, and Trump supporters out there will say, oh, don't say that, don't do that. But, you have to take it all in one. You have to take the good with the bad.
Claudia, tell us more about that relationship with Trump. Look, like I say, I met Trump in 2014. I've been at both inaugurations in 2016 and 2024. I seconded his nomination in both of those for the Conservative Party. I think he's doing a great job in terms of his policy. I understand that some people are critical about the way he sometimes talks about people. But the policies are right on, and what he's accomplishing in such a short period of time is pretty amazing, as far as I'm concerned. So you're with him in most all of these things, I take it.
Yeah, I love Trump. I mean, I think he's an amazing person. Look, and again, if you're going to get easily bruised and sensitive over a guy from Queens who was a real estate developer, I think my son said it best one day when he said everybody was complaining when he was running in 2016. They said, oh, he's not presidential. And my son said, what is presidential? Does it look like, some snobby diplomat from France or, that we left there, came here for freedom, and we have the rugged individualists and the patriots and the people that are, fighting for our system of government and stood up and were brave. I mean, that's the kind of person I see Trump as. He has so much courage, so much energy. I mean, look at this guy. I saw a video the other day of Bill Clinton doddering around like an old man. He's the same age as Trump. And Trump is like dynamic. I guarantee he's playing golf this weekend. Yeah. I played golf with him. He was completely, really fun. I joined him for 9 holes. It was unbelievable, hilarious, fun. Of course, Ralph is a lawyer. He was peppering me with legal questions. Yeah. And he also, the thing I was getting to before, one day he wanted to talk to my son on the phone. It was the day before he got deployed to the Middle East. And he said, can I call him? I was like, of course. Gosh, you're the president. You can do whatever you want. And I called my son thinking, oh, my gosh, he's not going to answer the phone. But he did. And I got to talk to the president for a few minutes. And he couldn't have been nicer and, was just amazing. And yet, I'll tell you something, Ralph, that's really kind of funny. Here's my son. He's a major in the Marine Corps, a U.S. Naval Academy graduate. He graduated with honors as a computer science IT major. He's getting a master's. He works at an important intelligence agency. He did his regular time in the Marine Corps serving, as a logistics officer, has been overseas a couple times on deployments, But guess what? There are people that are attacking him on my Facebook page. The Democrats attacking my son who's serving as a major in the Marine Corps. And it's like, we need more people to serve our country. My dad passed away before my son got into the Naval Academy, but he was always, idolized his older brother, Bill, who was enlisted in the Navy, and he'd come home in his naval uniform, and everybody would cry in the family. I mean, if he only knew his grandson, and maybe he's looking down from heaven, went to the Naval Academy, was super smart, served as a Marine, like my other uncle, who was a Bronze Star winner. I mean, these are things that we've got to get back in our country. And to have, just to be so low to criticize my son for serving and having and achieving, and this is the kind of thing that the Democrats are doing. This is why the Republicans are winning on policy. This is why the conservatives are strong. But this is the problem, and this is why I've been such a leader in this after my 2020 election, Ralph. We have got to understand that 2020 election was a problem. The Democrats realized that they cannot beat Trump on policy because he was winning then. He was doing great. All of a sudden, there's COVID. Then we have mass mail-in ballots, no verification. And the Democrats always find a way to undermine the process. They either use gerrymandering, and now they're using mail-in ballot harvesting and everything they can. And the Republicans have to wake up. You can't say, how can we lose, and then wake them and go, what happened? That's why I explain every vote. That's why I'm so aggressive on election integrity. I founded the Election Integrity Caucus. That's why I do so much explanation. As you said, I explain my votes. A lot of the things we don't understand. I led the NRA brief when we had the famous Bruin case coming out of New York State to overturn the Sullivan Law. We won that case. It was a landmark case. Guess what happened? Days later, Kathy Hochul goes to the legislature, and they overturn a Supreme Court decision, and we're back in court, using the money of great Second Amendment advocates, all the different groups across New York State who fought to win that case. And now here's the state of New York undermining our Second Amendment rights, going after our rights generally, the Bill of Rights, in every way they can with their veto-proof majority, and Kathy Hochul going along with this. But they have the process. And that's what worries me a lot. I mean, they're actually threatening to gerrymander in New York again after they just did it in 2024 and did it in 2022. So this is where, as Republicans, we just have to keep remembering that we need to continue to fight. Don't let them bully us with saying that, Trump's an authoritarian. Look, Trump understands what's going on. He has a very, business-like view to things. But he also has good people around him, and you and I are lawyers. Sometimes I'm like, okay, where's he getting this idea? But we have got to continue to clarify and tell the story of what we stand for, and that's why I do it every day. I'm constantly out there. You can't say I am not transparent. I put out as much as I can to educate the public. People need to know what we're doing, and I think that's one of the things the Republicans and the conservatives tend to not to fail on. It was one of the things I got inspired by my father. We have this great country. We get it. Trump gets it. Look at what he wants to do. He wants to do a 250th celebration. How lucky we've got the guy who does the greatest shows and puts on the greatest performances. President Trump every day in the Oval Office doing these amazing peace deals and other things he's doing. We need to do that as a party, as New York State. If we're going to preserve and save New York from these, communists and Marxist people that are coming in to take over our state, we've got to start speaking about the heroic history that we have and the need to preserve that. And that's what I'm fighting to stand. I love New York. I don't want to have to move to Florida or Tennessee or whatever. Let's make New York great, and I think that's what we have to do.
New York changes next year. That's going to happen. New York is going to change. Next gubernatorial election is going to be completely different. So Bob Davis has a question for you, Claudia.
Sure. Congresswoman, I was watching, obviously, Fox News last night, and once again, another federal district court judge overturns one of President Trump's executive orders. What can we do about that? It's just these lower court judges are, I think, undermining this president and what he's trying to do. And as an attorney, your thoughts, please.
Yeah, we continue to have this problem because if you look back at Trump's first term, Chuck Schumer, issued the blue slips. That's a procedural nicety of the Senate. It's not a law that says that we're going to honor, who gets appointed to office. Now, this has been abused by Chuck Schumer. In Trump's first term, we did not get any appointees for U.S. Marshal, for U.S. Attorney, and these important positions and judicial positions across the state. And now here they are again. Chuck Schumer is trying to block Trump from getting important people put in office. And there's some of the senators, the older senators are arguing we shouldn't be doing this. But I'm like, look, we have to fight to win. They do. Do you think that they're going to honor these rules when winning is on the line for maintaining our system of government? They're not interested in our system of government. Look at most Democrats. They support a communist, Mamdani. My own opponents that are running against me in this next election are fighting over who's more like Mamdani than the other. So we have to continue to get good judges appointed. We have to obviously they're using lawfare against us. These judges are going to continue to force us to go to the appellate level, go to the Supreme Court, and we have to actually go back to Congress, because in Congress we need to codify these. I went and looked at all of Trump's executive orders and tried to find the ones that we thought we could get made into law so that they wouldn't sit out there as executive orders to counter this. And a number of them we've done. One of the simple ones we just put in, which is a small one, but is, to make plastic straws legal again, okay? Things like that he put out. I mean, those are fun things, but there's some serious executive orders that they keep moving out. But all these things that Trump has put out as executive orders are really messaging to us in Congress. Let's get that done. Let's pass these as statutes and make sure that they're at the top of the legal chain. We know they're higher than anything else, especially when you're dealing with executive orders. So, I mean, we just got to keep fighting but I think the fact that Trump puts these markers out is really important. He's setting the stage for us to go and say, there's a bunch of bills. And that's what we did. We went and looked, okay, where in these executive orders can we introduce a bill to enact them into a statute, not an executive order? And that's what we've been doing on our side, and that's what we need to continue to do. And we have to fight every tooth and nail to get our House together. We have a one-seat majority. We got to we got to put all the moderates and the conservatives and everybody else to get to vote. Mike Johnson's doing an incredible job, one of my dear friends from my freshman class who doesn't get the credit he deserves. Also works really well with President Trump, but we also have to get the Senate to vote for these things. So a lot on the line, That's why I think it's really, I don't know if you guys saw this, but I think it's a great idea that President Trump wants to have a convention next year, a midterm convention, to celebrate the work that he's done and the work that Republicans have done to remind people this could all be gone if we lose the midterms.
That's an excellent
impeachment.
That's an excellent idea of his. I certainly read that the Democratic Party faces major voter registration crisis across this country. 30 states that tally these things. In 30 different states, Democrats are losing control. The new registrations are not Democrats. Democrats have fallen behind. I think that's because of Trump. That's because of where the Democrats have gone, how far to the left they are. It always shocks me when someone's willing to call themselves a socialistic Democrat. And we have a communistic Democrat that's going to probably be the mayor of New York City.
Yes, but what's really important is registrations are not votes. They find a way to get the ballots in the box, and that's what we have to do. That's what we should be laser focused on. The conservatives and the Republicans, especially when you talk about the gubernatorial election, we've got to stick together. We lost some seats we should have won last year in the state Senate and the state assembly. We probably could have won with a little more effort. Some of those, maybe one or two more of those congressional seats, we might be able to take those back this year in the midterms. We've got to fight every single day because you know what? They never stop. They never stop cooking up ways. Whether it's bringing in people, giving them licenses, getting them to register. Getting no excuse absentee ballots done after the voters of New York in 2021 rejected that. We had a ballot initiative in New York State, to give no excuse absentee ballots. The voters in a 2-1 Democrat state of New York rejected that, but the Democrats, what'd they do? They went back and reversed the will of the voters and voted to put mail-in ballots, this weird thing that, Kathy Hochul and Bennett or the Democrats did, to go back to that because they cheat. Drop boxes code for cheating. You can't verify these things. You can verify early voting. You can actually verify mail-in voting as long as you have the procedures in place. And that's all I'm talking about is verifying, securing votes, however you can get them in the box. Republicans have to remember, vote early, vote by mail, but make sure that we have secured voting. That's really, as long as we can secure the vote, any way that we can get more people to vote. And by the way, the proof, and I can tell you this from all across the data in the country, as of it wasn't this year, but last year, when we have high turnout, Republicans win. We have got to get Republicans and independents and Republican-leaning Democrats out to recognize that our very system of government is really in jeopardy, especially in a state like New York where you have high out-migration. You have a really tough, if Mandami wins, and he gets through some of the things he wants to do, that is going to have a negative impact on the rest of the state, not just New York City. So, and he also empowers the Democrat Socialists of America that are dominating the policy in Albany. So these are really important issues, but we've got to get out there and stand up for it. We need common sense people to run for office. Especially, I love people that have had a background in business. People who, and as you say, Ralph, earlier, know how to, make a business run, know what it's like to sign both sides of a paycheck, know what it's like me. There were times when I couldn't pay myself because I couldn't make payroll without it. I had to borrow. I couldn't pay my paper bill. I ran a newspaper. Sometimes my ink bill was too high, and I had to continually leverage it using sometimes my own credit card. But I know what that panic is. Like, oh, God, I can't believe we're not going to make payroll. Struggling to get the accounts receivable in, all those things. That makes you better, stronger, but it shouldn't be that way in New York. We should be thriving. We have so many great people. We have so many great assets as a state. We have to make sure we get it back. But dumb energy policy and dangerous, catastrophic energy policy coming from the Democrats. You played a Lee Zeldin clip on the top. Amazing that what he's doing on the EPA side. We're trying to site a Micron plant nearby my district. We can't get that in. You know what? Lee Zeldin cleared the way with EPA. We cleared the way. I led the bill for Micron in the One Big Beautiful bill to get them what they needed to build their fab here, to take it away from China. Guess what? Guess what's holding them up? The state of New York and the Department of Environmental Conservation. No one on the federal level is holding up. This is groundbreaking, critical stuff we could have in our state if not for the leftist Democrats with their stupid energy policy and their socialist policies on top of that.
This is so interesting. I want to get into some of the accomplishments of Trump, which are many, but let's talk about what a current one, D.C. crime, what he's done in Washington, D.C. Can you give me a little bit about how he's accomplished this, what he's been able to accomplish? My understanding is, according to the city's official database, there's a 44% decrease in violent crime in Washington, D.C.
It's incredible that just bringing in the National Guard, and I think they're mostly doing logistics and things like that, but they're giving the presence of security. And carjackings are down 87%. I'll tell you, I've had a couple of carjackings in front of my apartment building, which is not far from the Capitol. This is all in Navy Yard, which is a nice area, two blocks from National Stadium. You see overall crime is down substantially just by having the assistance and help of the National Guard. And Trump is using them in a way that I'm excited about going back to D.C. this week, because I'll tell you, it's really disheartening to walk around our nation's capital and see people lying around on the street, a corner, doing drugs, and we see that in New York a lot. But what he's doing is really important, and all these Democrats are decrying the National Guard. But Kathy Hochul completely screwed our corrections officers across the state. Took away their ability to have a decent working environment, took away all the tools in their tool chest to control prisons. We had 2 prisons overrun by inmates, incredibly, in our state because of her incompetence. And she brought in the National Guard, and they weren't even trained to go into the prisons, but they did what they could. But, for them to now suddenly say, we can't bring in the National Guard. Well, Nancy Pelosi brought in the National Guard into our nation's capital. So I think they give a lot of security and morale boosting to the Metropolitan Police in D.C., and I think they could be very helpful in other cities. Trump is talking about potentially going to Chicago, and guess what? The residents like it. I mean, the Democrat politicians don't like it, but look at their interviews with the residents. They're happy. They're welcoming it. They want peace on their streets. They want to be able to go to work and get their kids to go to school. The small businesses want to be able to operate without having to have people stealing from them and kidnapping and carjacking and all this stuff that's going on. I mean, it's just what law and order. Our society is not possible without law and order.
Like a lot of things, the Democrats are on the wrong side of this issue. So that's exactly what the issue is law and order. And the Democrats are taking the wrong position, which they've taken over and over again. Like you say, Kathy Hochul in that situation with the inmates. You may know that I represent 357 correction officers that were fired by Kathy Hochul. That was a terrible set of circumstances. She used the National Guard, just like you said, even though they weren't trained in the situation. And now they criticize Trump, but they are on the wrong side of that issue. That's why I feel they will lose. They are doubling down on the wrong side of these issues. Trump is showing that these statistics, murder down 57% in D.C., violent crime lowest in 30 years, all the statistics point in the right direction, and Trump is going to be the champion of law and order. And what he's doing is he's helping minorities in this situation. The deaths in Washington, D.C. are, for the most part, minority deaths, and that is being prevented.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. The National Guard, they're terrific, as you know, but they can't do, being a corrections officer to me is the hardest job there is. That's just an incredibly difficult job. Some of the National Guardsmen are actually under 21, so they couldn't technically legally be in some of the prisons under our law, but we had to have them there because of Hochul's policies and what she did to our corrections officers, and still fighting with the corrections officers who do a really difficult job. And, you got Mandami again coming in trying to close down the prisons, and you got Trump, showing that the Democrats, they look foolish. He's really got them boxed in on this. And you see these, videos of the Democrats in there, singing these little commie songs celebrating, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the MS-13 gang member who assaulted his wife and is involved in human trafficking, who's an illegal immigrant, the Maryland man. And people, after a while, it's just common sense. It isn't, you got to be, a Republican or Democrat. It's common sense.
Yes, it is.
You cannot have a free society without rule of law. It's the reason we're always in this, and as I mentioned this earlier in the show, everything we're doing, we're always trying to balance freedom and security, leaning always towards freedom, but we have to have security for people to go safely to school, to work, for businesses to operate. You can't have people undermining our system, and it's why it requires a certain ethic in our society. It's why we are founded on, a Judeo-Christian ethic, or if you don't believe in that, the golden rule, do unto others as you would have done unto you, kindness, making sure we respect others and their freedom and their space. That's all this is about, and the Democrats turned it into some hate thing. Trump really accepts everyone. He was the first president to really stand up for all kinds of people and all kinds of rights. It's why he's so popular with minorities and Hispanics. And I want to mention something that doesn't get talked about, since I'm so intimately involved with election integrity and also have been the victim of gerrymandering in New York a number of times, 3 times actually, even the state assembly, where I got the worst district in assembly history back in 2012. I got this gigantic district now, it's same thing. But the Senate, the Texas Republicans are realigning Texas. There's Republicans in Texas who are complaining that they're going to get their so-called R+35 super Republican districts made into less Republican districts, and that makes it more fair. They're actually getting less Republican. And so a lot of new citizens are Hispanic voters coming into Texas, and they don't want to be jammed in to a Democrat district. They're Republicans. They have our values. They want a Republican representative. They want more Hispanic representatives who are Republicans, who serve with me right now. And so when they start going after Texas and saying it's racist and anti-minority, it's the minorities who are crying out in Texas to get more fair district lines, and we're going to end up having more Republicans. That's the way the migration has gone in Texas.
Hey, Congressman, I want to ask you a question, make a statement, ask you a question. I'm the chairman of the Amherst Republican Party. I was the former chairman of the Erie County Republican Party. And in Amherst this year, we're running a small businessman, a successful small businessman, as you talked about before. The party needs to attract those individuals, Dan Gagliardo. And I think we're going to win for the first time in 12 years in Amherst. But we're fortunate this year that all of our candidates in Amherst are also supported by the Conservative Party, Chairman Larigo and Chairman DeFrancis in the town of Amherst. But, the Democrats, they align themselves with the other party, the Working Families Party, the party of Zoran Mamdani. And Mike, what bothers me is voters don't understand what the Working Families Party represents. They're a socialistic party. They're the party of Zamdani and many other Democrats in New York State, including Kathy Hochul. But in Amherst, a local town, but all politics is local and starts there, all the Democrats running for re-election in the town of Amherst are endorsed by the Working Families Party. But it's difficult to get the message out about what this party represents. These Democrats that have accepted the Working Families Party endorsement had to go through an interview process, and they had to answer a questionnaire. And the Working Families Party is the party of defund the police. But how do we get that message out, not only statewide next year in the gubernatorial race, but how do we get that out to the voters right now in a local race like I have in the town of Amherst, that if you're endorsed by that party, you represent socialistic views, like defund the police?
Yeah. I think that it's really important to look at the history of the Working Families Party. It started out as a labor party. It didn't grasp these communist views. When it first came out, it was supporting people who served in labor unions, every kind, whether it's, the trades, or even, CSEA and some of the public unions. But it changed. It has become a communist party subdivision of the Communist Party and really taken over by them. But I remember a number of working families, Republicans used to get the Working Families Party line because a lot of Republicans in upstate or a lot of Working Family Party members were actually in labor unions, trade unions, some of the Remington Arms employees who were in UMWA. They were actually Working Families Party members too, but they believed in gun rights, they believed in conservative values, and they actually supported people who supported labor but supported conservative views like the police and the fire and the trades. That has changed. The Working Families Party has been taken over by the Communist Party, the Marxist-derived party and that is what people need to understand. It is no longer the party of the labor unions in the style that we're accustomed to in upstate New York. Again, police, fire, trade union representatives, IBEW, and those types of groups. That is not who they are anymore.
They have certainly changed. I mean, we have made a decision early on, like you say, the Working Families Party was the Labor Party, and we would allow conservative Democrats or conservative Republicans to take that party line at the very beginning. We have now made it a rule that you can't have both. You can't have the conservative line and the Working Families Party line. They are so diametrically opposed. And again, they are the party of defunding the police. They are the party of inmates versus correction officers. They are the party of getting rid of prisons, actually. It is amazing what they're willing to do, and socialism isn't where they're at. They're further to the left than that. There's no question about it.
Absolutely, they're Marxists. You've got to take a screenshot out of their policy position because I've looked at it before and put that in there. When my opponents that I'm going to be running against, I assume there's a few Democrats. They'll be in a primary. When they accept the Working Families Party line in a district like mine, we're going to highlight this is what they stand for. You are carrying the flag basically for this party, and that's what your candidates are up against. This is who you stand for. You are, this is they accepted to defund the police. You take the Working Families Party at its full value. It's all or nothing. You should, if you're truly a moderate Democrat, you cannot, and you believe in the police, you cannot accept the Working Families Party line.
Totally
and remember,
agree.
You know how
voters need to understand that.
Yeah, people go out and get signatures, and you often have greater political forces taking over these parties. They change enrollments, and they figure out a way to take over parties. They've done it with the conservative parties in certain parts of the state, too. And all of a sudden, all the Democrats are getting endorsed, and they don't have anything to do with conservative. They're very left-leaning. Trust me, in Washington, there aren't any moderate Democrats. They vote with Nancy Pelosi or now Hakeem Jeffries 100% of the time. Once in a while, we'll get like the main Democrat. We're a very independent state. He'll vote with us occasionally, but not on anything significant. Still voting to defund the police. Still voting for communist type of things that are put out by the Democrats. So that is a really important point, and they are the party of Mamdani. He is their standard bearer.
And we're going to make sure the voters in Amherst know that this year.
To me, that's why they have to lose.